Hello and welcome to another episode of No Ordinary Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Chris Barron, and each week I sit down with a guest whose job is far from ordinary. We explore how they got there and what it's really like behind the scenes, and then they'll deep dive into the single most unforgettable experience of their career. Today I've got someone a bit different for you. My guest is someone whose job centers around an interesting and often taboo subject. Dr. Hannah Gould is an anthropologist who studies death and dying. Everything from the rituals that we perform to the realities of the death care industry and its workers, which you can imagine takes her to some dark but pretty fascinating places that few of us get to see. In Hannah's big story, she relives the time that she attended a massive death care conference in Japan and ended up being on stage as a demonstration corpse, which is a very funny story, so stick around for that. I'm going to give a quick trigger warning here for this episode. While the conversation we have is mostly fun and insightful, we do, of course, touch on some topics around death which may be difficult or confronting for some listeners, so please do use discretion. With all that said, I am incredibly excited to bring you guys this conversation with Hannah. You are listening to No Ordinary Monday. Let's get into the show. All right. Hannah Gould, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Cold.
Yeah.
Cold.
Chilly
It's
Brisbane.
Melbourne.
Melbourne. Sorry, not Brisbane.
No, we don't do Brisbane. We're cold Melbourne.
Yeah. So it's actually, I don't know, maybe a couple of years since we last saw each other face to face when we were working on the on a documentary about death for the Australian
Yes, up in
Broadcasting
Sydney.
Corporation. Yeah.
Up in Sydney, documentary about death. One of the weirder emails and phone calls I've ever received.
And that's coming from a death researcher.
And from a death researcher. So, my inbox is just filled with some absolute pals, members of the public, various tech people, doctors, etc., just asking me for my hot takes about cremation, etc. But yeah, no, you stood out, and
Nice.
very fun experience, but also, again, one of the oddest experiences of filming that and then trying to smuggle a small corpse model through domestic airport in Sydney.
So basically,
yeah, some context required for that anecdote.
yeah. So we were making a documentary for the ABC about death and dying, and we had this great host, Matt O'Kine, who's a comedian, and I think we were kind of like, oh, how do we sort of make this interesting for people and show all the different ways that you can like get prepared or treated after you die? How do you get rid of a body? Yeah. And then so obviously I found you and your work, and I thought, oh, Hannah would be great for this. And I emailed you and say, hey, Hannah, do you want to come and bury a tiny model of Matt O'Kine in 7 or 8 different ways? We can we're going to flame him with like a little torch. We're going to bury him at sea. We're going to.
Well, I still have one from that recording.
Yeah, I noticed he's in the shelf behind you.
Pride of place in my office. But one of the things was I did have to kind of, I only took hand luggage, so I had to take him back through my hand luggage in Sydney Airport. And what I didn't realize at the time, which I must have knew, is that it has like a wire frame through the middle of the paper mache.
Yeah.
So it goes through the scanner, and it comes up with this tiny little, and he's in a coffin, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I get stopped. I don't know if I ever told you this. I got stopped. And my bags
I don't think you told me. No.
I got my bags got opened, and they were like, I mean, they didn't like outright say, "Why do you have a small, voodoo doll in your bag of a famous Australian comedian?" But I think it was implied. And I just kind of had to look at them and be like, "I have an interesting job. I'm sorry. What do you want from me here? Like, is this illegal?"
Did you tell them like what you're at that point? Did you have to explain like I am a death researcher, or?
I just kind of said it. I just kind of said, "Oh, I've been up here filming some TV, and this is one of the props. Is there anything like it doesn't?" I think I said it doesn't contain liquid.
It hasn't got organs.
It's like, they think it's like, I don't know. I mean, I imagine that is like one of those jobs where you just find the absolute weirdest stuff in people's bags and you just have to really stone face ignore it because people can carry whatever they can carry. But
That's
yeah, I think certainly like the miniature coffin that Matt signed for me certainly didn't necessarily help with the
brilliant.
Yeah. Great experience. Well,
that's obviously like, it was super fun. But I mean, I guess with all that said, what would you say is the most interesting way to explain what you do for a living?
Wow. I mean, in some ways, my job is very boring in the sense that it's a very normal job. I think I work and I teach at a university. I suppose the odd thing about my job is that I do that researching two very non-controversial topics, which is religion and death. And specifically, I focus a lot on dead bodies and what to do with them and how we treat them and like how our religious responses to them have changed. So my job basically is to try and understand like what is going on with death and dying in Australia. And also I do work in Northeast Asia and Japan and Korea. And then to try and use those findings to create some kind of meaningful change, right? So educating students about
like
how
policy,
to talk about
policy
death.
change kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, like educating students to be more comfortable with death and talk about death, particularly medical students. I teach a lot of medical students about how to say the D word, and then also policy change, right? So things like big questions like should we be allowed to bury our pets with us in cemeteries? Or how much does death cost? How much should death cost? Who should pay for a funeral?
Which is a big question.
Massive question.
Becoming a bigger question.
Which it's all really normal, except then you add the element of staring into the existential void that is our mortality every day.
I think I can just imagine it like using the cocktail party test, like you're sort of milling around and someone comes up to you, so hey, what do you do? You're like, oh, I'm an academic, I'm an anthropologist, and they start to sort of glaze over, and then you're like, about death, and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I have lied to many an Uber driver, I've got to say. Which I actually think is a really good test of if your job is weird, is like, do you lie to an Uber driver? Because if you were tired and you're just trying to get in a car somewhere and they ask you what you do and you're like looking at them and you think, I don't know if I really want to get into this. Like, why are you here? Oh, I'm here for the annual cemeteries convention. Yeah.
So what is it like? Clearly people's reactions are their eyes go a little bit wide and go, oh, that's weird. But what is it about death that, I don't know, fascinates people? Or like, what I find interesting is like there's a weird way that we treat death in some ways that we're so obsessed with it, with like true crime, so much like in like media, for example, like TVs, movie shows, the movies, so much true crime, death, afterlife, paranormal, blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to real life, it's like, no, don't talk about it.
Yeah, this is the great kind of contradiction. So, I mean, the theory that we've rejected now is that death is taboo, or like that no one ever wants to talk about death or think about death. And exactly what you're saying is like, well, no, because people bloody love true crime podcasts. I'm in Melbourne. Everyone's been following the mushroom murderer. That's been all the news. That's all we've got,
global.
And also like, video games, it seems like the more gruesome the death, the better, right? Like people are really attracted to this kind of extraordinary deaths, right? And they're not so interested in thinking about death in the kind of normal, banal, aka the kinds of deaths that they imagine could happen to them, right? And I think that's always made a lot more sense to me. It's that it remains taboo, but the natures of taboo is that humans desperately love to break taboos. We're just not necessarily so comfortable doing it in public.
I mean, I think the thing that is, you mentioned earlier that you do a lot of work with like medical students, doctors, people in the medical field. Like those are arguably some of the people that are closest to the conversation, because every day they may see people die. They may actually be the people that are trying to prevent death and all that sort of stuff. And they're some of the people that have the hardest time talking. Like I was so surprised that like people in that field aren't so well conversed in like talking about death and like facing death and dealing with death. And knowing what to do. So like, just tell me like what
Yeah.
have you experienced when you're working with them?
So we've only been teaching like Death and Dying 101 at Melbourne Uni since like a couple of years now.
That's
And
crazy. And before that, there was nothing. It was just like, you are a doctor,
and like,
you go and save lives.
This is an elective subject. And really, they don't even, in their core, they don't even really get, you know, there's like how to deliver bad news, I suppose, some training. It's not, you know, in the fundamental curriculum. But it's just kind of other things like, you know, cremation versus burial, or what should you do to the body? How do you handle a body at the point of death or dying so that it, you know, gets to the family in the best condition, for example, like super practical. Or like, you know, should you say the D word? Like, what does the research actually say about how to talk to people about death and dying and what families want and what patients want? And that kind of thing is pretty shocking in the sense that it's not being educated to doctors. And I think it's kind of sad, not only because people don't have the language or they don't know how to deal with it, but what I always think is extraordinary is like, you know, the students we get in Death and Dying and the medical subject, we get them like 12 weeks into their medical degree. They've only just started.
Yeah.
And already 12 weeks in, they are incredibly scared, but also guilty. Like they genuinely think that if somebody dies, it's their fault and they've failed. Right?
It's like murder.
Like this idea of failure is like the goal of medicine is to save people, and if somebody dies, then I have not done medicine well.
Like death is the literal is the enemy. Like
of medicine.
Constantly fighting him off. Yeah,
it's not this fault for these like young trainee doctors, because like that is how the medical system has been set up. I mean, apart from like some fields like palliative medicine, who are obviously brilliant on this, that is how the majority. And we like, you know, it slipped into our everyday language. You know, you think about cancer, like it's a battle, it's a fight, you know, all these kind of things. And so obviously if somebody dies, they lose their battle with cancer, right? No one ever just dies. Like you have to lose a battle with cancer, which I think is terrible terminology. So we kind of have to do a lot of work.
Have you got a better way of phrasing it?
They had cancer and then they died. Well, they died from cancer. It just doesn't have to be a war.
Sugarcoat it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a war. I mean, we talk about that. We talk about like, should you use the D word? And you know, you don't always have to use it, but there's so many numerous examples, like pretty horrific examples of a lack of communication or a failure of communication, and families not clocking on to the fact that they're going to, like, that their loved one's going to die or their person's going to die, and the person themselves not clocking on to the fact that the medical doctor is trying to tell them that we have, you know, they'll say things like, we're going to stop medical interventions, or we're recommending palliation, or we're moving you to comfort care. Just tell them.
They'll never actually say, you will die.
Like, we suspect that you will die within the next however many months, or we're not sure when you're going to die, but we suspect that this, you know, we're pretty sure that this illness will kill you. You will die. We don't think there's anything we can do to prevent that.
Have you ever thought about, I mean, have you ever sort of yourself swapped roles?
Maybe.
As yeah, keep it a bit nicer. But like, if you were in that position, like getting that news, would you not want them to sugarcoat it, or at least sugarcoat it for your family? Or would you be like,
I've been in that position.
Just say it like it is.
I've been in that position though. Like I've seen, so my dad died. One of the reasons I got into this whole work is like my dad died 2013, like 13 years ago, 12 years ago. I was super young. I was 22, 23. I thought I was very mature and totally able to deal with that knowledge when it happened. You know, and I was like, he was in hospice and I was in hospice with him, and he had not accepted the fact that he was dying and was kept asking about like potential treatments and that sort of stuff. And I saw the doctor come in and kind of just entertain his idea that there might be possible treatments, like that. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, and I think part of it is that, you know, I wonder if it's that doctors are really worried about destroying hope, right? That they think hope is so important, right? We can't let people give up or have an existential crisis, to which I can only reply, like, it's death. Of course you're going to have an existential crisis. That's kind of the point. Like,
you're not supposed to be okay with it, but it doesn't mean you can't deal with it.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly right. 100% those things. You don't have to be okay with it. Like, you don't, it's not something, and that getting out of that mindset for students, like, this is not something you can solve, right?
Yeah.
It's not a problem for you to solve. And so I try and get them to think about, instead of like their goal being life-saving, is I say to them, every single patient that you see, whether you're a podiatrist or pediatrics or chiropractor, not just a medical profession, any kind of health, every single person, your job is either to help them die later or die better.
Yeah.
But they're all gonna die.
No one's going to live forever.
No one has ever made it out of here alive.
Yeah.
We're all, so you're not saving them from death. You're either delaying it or making it better, and hopefully both. Like,
have you had any feedback from those students about that course? Have they gone, it's completely changed the way I've thought about it, or the first time that a patient did die on me, I thought back to what you were saying, blah, blah, blah.
I've had medical students actually who have come into the program being like, I'm really terrified of death, and like, I don't want this to be part of my job. And, thankfully, luckily, through talking about it and exposing it and removing some of that fear, they're now, far more comfortable, I think, in the conversations they're having. And, hopefully also when they then go to the hospital and see a death, declaration, verification, they feel more comfortable, right? And they can be better for the family and for their colleagues as well. Yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned your father's passing, or in fact, say the father died.
Yeah, he died. It's fine.
So, yeah. It's so natural for me to even say to someone who's
the one I hate is
that,
really is always like, he lost. I was like, he's not behind the couch. Like, we know where he is.
He lost him. Yeah.
Yeah, when he died. Yeah.
So yeah, your father died. Your dad died, and but I mean, on the podcast, I love to sort of understand people's origin stories. So that's obviously your origin story into the death industry. But even before that, what did you want to be as a kid? Do you remember?
Well, when I was 6, Chris, I wanted to be either a ballerina or a fairy. As my mum likes to remind me.
Oh, when did those dreams get crushed?
Two viable career choices that I... No, I mean, I was reflecting on this the other day. I think I was always a very precocious, very studious young child. And I distinctly remember the first time I met somebody who was like a young woman who had a doctorate, who was studying for her PhD. And I thought, oh my God, like, I could do that. Like, I want to get a PhD. That's the thing I want to do. I want to work at a university. And I was at Oxford for my master's, and I was studying religion. So I've always been really interested in different religious cultural beliefs, and specifically, I mean, in this kind of the fundamental question of death, which is like, how does matter relate to spirits? It's kind of an odd way of putting it, but a crucifix is just a crucifix. How does it become holy, right? Like an altar is just an altar. It's a piece of wood. Sometimes they're mass-produced pieces of wood. Sometimes they're carved. Like, how does that...
But we imbue them with power.
Yeah, how do we imbue them with power? Like, how do we imagine, where does the power come from? When does a thing become holy? When does it become more than just stuff? Which, ironically, is kind of the opposite of the body, right? Like, this is a thing that was human, and at some point it stops maybe being human and is now a thing. Like, it was a subject and now is an object. Yeah, and so there's a process by which the kind of, this kind of spirit, leaves the body at some point. And I say spirit not in a particularly religious way, but like in any kind of this recognition that this is more than just stuff. And like, what is the process by which this thing, which is more than stuff, eventually does just become stuff? Or does it ever become stuff? Which I like is not a, I think I got my PhD some time ago. I'm not going to answer this one anytime soon.
Yeah.
I suspect it may be a fundamental question of the human condition as opposed to an easy topic. So I started studying like religion and Buddhism and Buddhist materiality, and it just kind of so happened, or weirdly enough, the Buddhist altars that I was focusing on are also where people make offerings to the ancestors. And so I became more and more engaged in ancestor worship, veneration, death. And then my dad died, and big question, right? Like, what on earth is going on? I remember this distinct moment of funeral planning for him, where there was, I don't know if you've ever arranged a funeral. Have you ever arranged a funeral, Chris?
I haven't. No, I mean, touch wood, and been lucky not to.
Most people, like, probably, if they're lucky, will only do one or two in their lives, right? Most people who are privileged enough to, you know, outlive their children to, you know, if you're lucky, you'll probably one or two, which is great. But I remember this distinct moment. They bring all these like glossy books to your house. They did in the day. I'm sure it's on iPads now. But they're like catalogs of coffins.
Yeah.
And they all have these absolutely naff, terrible names that are like Mahogany's Kiss or like Rosewood and Jewel, you know, like worse than paint colors, kind of terrible made up names for these brands. And I just had this like moment of sitting there trying to like pick a coffin thinking, like, who on earth designed this? Like, why is this the stuff that we've decided is the stuff that we want for the dead? Yeah. And also, you know, being someone who's quite a materialist, like in the sense of like quite an atheist, you know, I was like, oh, he's dead. It doesn't matter what box he's in. Like, why am I shelling out tens of thousands of dollars for Mahogany's Kiss or whatever the coffin is?
Yeah.
And so I think that just like reaffirms this idea that no, this is the thing I should do. This is the thing I should study, which is death and dying in Australia and kind of that relationship between stuff and spirit.
Cool. So you mentioned you've done a lot of work in Australia. You've done a lot of work in obviously like Asia, you know, Korea, Japan as well. And, you know, just observing how different people, different countries, different cultures deal with death and the rituals around death. I'm just really curious, like, what are some of the most unsettling or horrifying or beautiful things that you've seen when you're looking at, it could be in Australia or anywhere else that you worked?
I think one of the weirdest things about working in death is that it's both horrifying and beautiful at the same time, a lot of the time. And that's like, it always struck me as almost like too much information was going into my brain, like a real challenge to process and understand what had just happened. I mean, obviously I have this job, which is similar to your job in many ways, that, you know, I go into these worlds, I go into these workplaces for a few weeks or a few months, and I learn how to cremate a body and I learn how to bury somebody, or maybe not similar to what you do every day, but, you know, I get to experience these insights into people's world, and I have to remember that, like, well, these people that is their day to day, that is their 9 to 5, right? And like, I don't think we often think about like someone's 9 to 5 being cremating a body, but that is that's a lot of people's 9 to 5 is go to work, cremate 10, 12 people, go home. Go to work, cremate 10, 12 people, go home, go to the footy on the weekend, go to the pub, you know, tell really bawdy jokes to deal with the emotional stress of having to cremate 10 people.
And they do. These people, like, they do experience stress, I guess.
Yeah. It's really funny because I'm always kind of almost hesitant to share stories because I think I try and be very careful about what I share, and I try and, I will tell you a story that's quite confronting, but one of the hardest things of working at the Crem is, like, I think, you know, not for me, like, going in there for a few days, but for the people who actually work there 9 to 5 is obviously children and child death and having to cremate children remains, partially because so little of a child makes it through the crematorium. Right, that it produces such little material, and, you know, thinking about death and the sacred, like, if there is one thing that is sacred across societies, it is children, and so children dying is such a tragedy in every circumstance, and so people working at the crematorium, you'd think, oh, they must be immune to this by now. This is their day to day, but at the same time, like, when there is a kid that comes through that is the same age as someone's child who works there, that's a really tough day for everyone at the Crem. I mean, look, I always struggle to share it because I don't know how much people want to know, but, you know, there's a real surreal experience of just talking to this guy who worked at the Crem, and we're just having this casual conversation, and while we were having that casual conversation, he was crushing the bones of an infant with the back of a teaspoon. because that was the,
Oh my God.
usually cremation, you put the remains through a whole machine, which is like a cremulator, and it produces this fine ash. And usually for most human remains, there's a lot of ash. But when it's a child, the cremation staff do all the best that they can to make sure that all of the potential, every little tiny bit, because there's so little, gets to the family or the parents. And so the best way to do it is to do it manually, right? And I just think it was such an odd, of all the uses of the term surreal, that is probably the one that really, I'm just chatting to him about work and life and that, and he's doing this kind of incredibly traumatic, meaningful. I think I almost think about it as just superlative. It is everything too much in that experience, right? Everything too much is happening. And then he does maybe 3 or 4 of those a day, and then goes back to his family and has dinner and goes to the
cremations or
children, crashing, so
children.
Yeah, depending on the crematorium and the capacity and all these other questions. And I think it kind of, one of the things that's so hard to talk about those experiences, I think because they affect a lot of people, and obviously, if people, have kids, imagining that's so horrific. But then I also think that it's so incredibly sad that we don't imagine that more, in the sense that we never think about the people whose job that is. We desperately want them to do a good job. We want them to be good people, and we want them to do their job well because we need them to. But we don't pay them very well. And, when they say they work at a crematorium, we maybe treat them with a bit of stigma or taboo. And we think, oh, you must be how could you possibly do that job? But somebody needs to do it, and we really want them to do it well. Do you know what I mean? And so it's this kind of, this, as horrible as that, not horrible, but as intense as that experience is, it's my gosh, you really hope that on your worst day there's someone who is willing to do that.
Yeah.
And is willing to do that work.
They're good at their job, and they take pride in their job, and blah, blah, they don't do it.
Yeah, and if it means that they have to tell some bawdy jokes to get through the day, I am all for, good for them. Do whatever they need to do, because that is not, I was only there for a couple of weeks, but that is not something that I could do.
So, on the show, we like people to come on and share sort of the craziest experience of their career. Sometimes that's a single day, sometimes an event. Obviously, you've done and seen a lot in your time. I'm wondering if you can share a story or stories from your experiences.
So one of the oddest experiences is, and I think this probably drives home how normal but also odd this whole sector is there's lots of really big funeral cemeteries, crematorium industry conventions around the world. Famously, the American one is often in Vegas, which is super fun to, go to Vegas and look at rows and rows of the latest and greatest new inventions in coffins.
Wow.
But the one that I often go to is in Tokyo, Japan. And that, again, is in a big convention center. You wake up in the morning, get a coffee, go to the convenience store. You're there, you're ready. And you go into this convention center, and it's just several football fields worth of death tech, death merch, death stuff. It's a trade show, right?
Yeah.
And every industry has a trade show, and the death care sector has a trade show. And so, my day, this was a few years ago, this industry convention called Endex, and my day kind of began with witnessing a robotic Buddhist priest recite sutras for the dead.
Oh my God.
Moved
Did it look like a robot, or did it look like an android kind of? It looked
it's a robot. It's called Pepper.
No,
it's a robot created by SoftBank. And it was designed, it was used in this case because they don't have enough Buddhist priests to recite sutras for the aging population.
Oh my God.
So I started there, which is a totally very weird start to your morning. And then I walked over, I mean, this is all in a single day. I walked over to where someone was giving out free samples of coffee, but the coffee beans were being ground with a recycled gravestone. So it was like two big pieces of marble that they had created like a millstone of.
Yeah.
Delicious coffee. So you've kind of been freaked out by the Buddhist robot. Then you get your coffee. You walk over to the people who are selling mobile pet crematoriums where they'll like drive around the countryside with a van that has a furnace and cremate your pet on the spot for you. Sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Transition to the kind of fashion designers for funeral dress.
Yeah.
And end up, in my case, at this school that offers like ritual dressing, mortuary dressing for the dead in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
People might be familiar. There's quite a famous Oscar award-winning film called Departures, or kuribito in Japanese, which is about this quite traditional practice in a small part of Japan of like washing and dressing the dead in front of the family. So the mortician would come into the home, the dead is laid out in the kind of living room, and they would basically, clean, wash, dress, then change the clothes, switch the clothes, put the makeup on for the dead. And this is all like performed in front of the family, and it's done this extremely ritualized, careful manner so that no part of bare skin is ever visible to the family, and it's all incredibly respectful, and it's done like in a very ritualized, beautiful fashion. So they're having this, right? Then you walk up to this, Okuribito Academy who are teaching young people this skill about how to dress the dead, and they're having this competition for funeral professionals, and there's 3 categories. Hottest monk, important, ikemen or what? Yeah, but like hot in the sense of like the full package. So also can give give a great sermon, but also looks good. Hottest monk, Miss Funeral Attendant, like Miss Universe, but like Miss Funeral Attendant.
But
yeah. And then they were having like a corpse dressing competition that was for like who can dress the body the quickest, most professional, most beautiful.
Yeah.
On a live stage with live music pumped in the background with like commentators. And, immediately, yes, I will be a demonstration corpse. This is what my life has been leading up to.
Hand went straight up.
Hand straight up. And like, it should be said also, I'm the only white person there. I'm the only foreigner there. I speak Japanese, so it's, you can get around. Like, so, this is mostly, it's not even for media. It's this is an internal space. This is by the funeral sector, for the funeral sector, right? And this is for people who, which I think are always interesting spaces to be. I was like, I will do this. This is what I want to do in life. And it was just a totally, again, the word surreal is not a great word, but like it was just in some ways an out of body experience because. So wait,
so it was like 3, like more. Were you the only one, or you were just a demonstration corp, and multiple people were like competing to like dress you for funeral?
Oh no, there was multiple people, multiple demonstration corpses.
Okay, gotcha.
On the event. On this occasion, I mean, I've done this a few times at this convention. I think they must think I'm a bit obsessed now. But the first time it happened, it was just like you walked up to this like stand at a convention center, and there's like tatami mats out, and there's like a pile of white kimono. You buried in white in Japan traditionally. There's a like white kimono out, and they kind of say, "We're going to have a demonstration. Is there a volunteer from the crowd?" Immediately, yes, this is what I want to do. This is after the robot priest and the milk ground coffee, and I'm like, I'm already there. I'm like, sign me up. Now is my time. And so I was like, okay. And I said, well, wait, what do you need me to do? And I'm just like wearing like, a suit or whatever. I was like, what do you want me doing? It's just like, well, just pretend to be dead and lie down. And I was like, okay. But I immediately screwed it up because like the first thing that happens is you're lying there and he comes and the person who's doing the dressing comes and bows over the corpse. But I am so ingrained, having lived in Japan at that point for multiple months, that I like bow back to him. As I'm like there as the corpse, you know, like this, like, you know, thank you for your like, stop moving, you're dead. So I failed immediately. But after that, it was just like really odd. They obviously didn't undress me. They were just putting on the clothing that they would usually put on in that case. But it kind of felt like a really rough massage that had absolutely no care about what it must feel like. Because as it struck me, this person's not really thinking how the dead will appreciate it or not. Like this is a visual performance for the people sitting in front. But so it's just kind of like people shoving a lot of fabric underneath you very quickly and like trying to wrap you in the right materials. And like it was kind of a Monty Python comedy of errors. Like my feet were too big for like whatever the Japanese size like feet coverings they had. And like
and were they laughing or were they kind of getting a little bit stressed? Because this is a competition, right?
Hyper serious.
Oh, really?
Nothing can... Unflappable. Because that's their whole job, is to be unflappable.
Yeah.
I mean, funeral attendants, funeral directors, anyone who runs a funeral, I mean, get them to organize anything in your life because they've got skills, but also completely unflappable because like it is their job to appear calm, collected, like everything's perfect, even if it's all falling apart. Which often is, because that's the other thing. Funerals often go wrong. They're just events that things often go wrong. So this is all kind of like a bit of a comedy errors, and I can't see anything, and I just really want to see. So I'm like trying to open my eyes as a dead person. And I mean, it's fine in the end, but it's just that is one of many ways in which I just became dressed as a corpse. And
oh my God! But wait, did you win?
My guy was like the he was like the head. He's like the head. I went to the top for my first corpse dressing experience.
Wow!
But have subsequently, I got the gold treatment.
You're a good corpse. You were a very good corpse.
I was a very good corpse. It's a skill that you don't really think about, and then you end up at some point of your life thinking it's like a real record scratch moment in my life.
So, one of the things that we actually covered on the documentary when we worked together on that one, or you were part of, but it's this idea of peak death, you know? And it's something that I have been following kind of separately, just the fact that population is in decline, which essentially means in the coming years, we're going to have a lot more dead people than people being born, but essentially just the population of aging people and people dying will increase.
Yes.
I mean, there's several things I want to go into on this. Obviously, like, you know, there's careers in the death industry and that market and all that stuff. But like, just talk us through like that sort of concept, what's happening right now. And sort of
I mean, look,
society.
if you're looking for a career path that AI will not disrupt, handling dead bodies. Can I introduce you?
Except if it's robots into priests.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, God damn it. The robots will win again. So yeah, peak death is a little bit of an amorphous concept. It's not very well studied yet, and it's something I'm actually hoping to do a big project on in a couple of years. But it is something that we've noted a little bit more in aged care. But peak death is basically a phenomenon where more people will die than ever before as a result of our demographics, and they are demographics of aging populations, and particularly demographics of populations that experienced a post-World War II baby boom. And then subsequently, the baby boomers have not had as many kids as their generation, as it were. So we've got this kind of bulge in our demographics. And I think the youngest baby boomer is just past 65 this year, which is what Australia classifies as an older person.
Yeah.
I always find this quite awkward to talk about, because I'm a millennial, and there's something particularly...
Same.
Yeah. So when I stand up in front of a room of people, particularly when I'm asking for funding and say the baby boomers will die, like, you know, bless her heart, my professor here, she's like, well, you can't say that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't say that? She's like, well, but I don't want to hear it. I'm like, well, but millennials will die. I'm fine saying that. It's not an offense. This is not an accusation.
Yeah.
You're older Australians. You're going to die soon. This is fine. Like, this is what happens to everyone. But the question is not so much like, there's a two-part question. One is like, does our deathcare system as it currently stands have enough capacity to handle what's going to happen? Do we have enough crematorium? Do we have enough graves? Do we have enough professionals who work in the sector, whether that be a grief counsellor or a probate lawyer or, I don't know, a crematorium officer? Whatever it is, you know, are we going to be able to handle this? And, you know, add to that the spicy, fun, exciting perspective of a pandemic. Throw that in somewhere, you know, that could also put pressure. And then I think the second one that's also kind of interesting is, what is it about that generation that might change our relationship with death, both in how they approach death and how they choose to die, but then also like how their children choose to bury and cremate and commemorate them. So not to say that there's both like challenges and opportunities, but there's like a concern about capacity in my mind, but then there's also like a lot of interesting questions about like, well, then what will this look like? Because we haven't really hit there yet. Like it's coming. I've always wanted to write a book that's just called Death to Boomers, but no one will let me.
That's going to be a tough one to get published.
Clickbait title, and then a very compassionate and considered book, which is just about subtitle. Yeah, classic.
I love it. I mean, as I said, like in today's world, especially for like the Gen X, Gen Z, the job market doesn't look as strong as it may have been in our generation or
putting it mildly. Yeah, things are not getting great for my young students who are thinking how to make a living.
The death care industry is a strong place to look. I mean, if people were interested, I mean, there's a lot of work that is going to, a lot of demand for work in that section. But what you've worked with a lot of these people, what does it sort of depend? I mean, there's a huge spectrum of roles you can take in the death care industry, but I mean, generally, what does it take to be someone that sort of works with death every day?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, you know, someone who cremates bodies every day it can be a rather different skill set to somebody who is sitting down with families to arrange a funeral.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a whole group of people who see their job as horticulture, and their job is to, you know, look after cemeteries and do the lawns and do the botanical gardens and maybe dig a grave. So that's an area that you could get into. But what does it take to deal with death every day? I think one of the interesting things is that I think when we go back to talking about like death taboos and death anxiety, what I find really interesting is that there's two groups of people that we tend to think that more religious people might have less death anxiety, right? Like, oh, you've got an idea of the afterlife, therefore you're not going to be scared of death. What the research has found, and this is ongoing, is that actually if you have strong religious belief or if you have strong atheist convictions, then you're less afraid of death. And it's the great kind of uncertainty that is what tends to make people more anxious about death, right? So it's almost like an inverted U in terms of death anxiety. And I think you don't need to have all of the answers or have like, you know, a total, you know, idea of what's going to happen to you after you die, you know, sort of thing, to enter into death and to work in death. But you need either some kind of belief or some kind of deep pragmatism. I think that's really important. Like you need to kind of be okay with going to work in a field that can be very emotionally taxing and distressing, and also like go home and go to the footy. Like have something that grounds you, that is part of your life. That's good and wholesome, and it's your dog, and it's running a marathon, and it's knitting, it's whatever it is. And then I think it's like a requirement, which is that you must have a good sense of humor. Yeah. Like whatever you do in death care, you have to laugh, because I mean the alternative is that you cry, and you can't invest that emotionally all the time. Like I think the funniest people I know are death studies scholars and death care workers.
Yeah.
Because nothing is off limits. Because why would it be off limits when it's your day job?
Mm-hmm.
And then everything is funny. Like, everything is funny. And it's, look,
There are
it's
no
a bit of,
taboos. You can talk about anything.
yeah, it's a little bit of a liability when you're out, like at a public restaurant or a bar or a cafe. And you're just trying to talk about a fat fire or like a grave
Oh,
collapsing or like
yeah.
a punch up at a funeral or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
All of which, you know, are part of the job.
Yeah.
But having some pragmatism and having a good sense of humor, I think, are things that allow people to do this work, which is really important, actually.
Brill. That's great. I mean, just as we sort of wrap up here, what kind of final word? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're baby boomer or you're Gen X, millennial, Gen Z. What kind of final piece of advice would you give to people about death or death care or the industry or just about how you're handling
Just a
with
quick
it?
meaning of life wrp up.
Yeah, just wrap up with a quick. Just sum it up for us in 2 sentences. No, I'm just joking. I'm just curious, because it's something we did look at on the ABC show. I mean, the fun of that documentary was kind of just, I mean, if you had to sum it up into a single phrase, was be prepared. But I wonder what your thoughts are on it.
I think it's not, be prepared is good, but I think it is actually to not hold on too tightly to anything, right? Like, don't have a plan, decide, have preferences, whatever it is. But like, being with death is fundamentally learning to be with uncertainty, right? We don't know when it's going to happen. It might happen tomorrow. Who knows it's going to, where, when, all these kind of things. It's a practice in like just being okay with uncertainty. And so preparation's great. Talking to people is better. Like, having your own plans is great. Talking to somebody about those plans is even better. And then the final thing is just find a way to make that conversation fun. So like, find an in. And if it's, scattering your ashes at a famous football ground or cricket ground, or if it's like, what would be the best playlist or best last meal or whatever it is, find an in to start that conversation. Because I think as we've discussed, like the cocktail party effect, the Uber driver, if you do start the conversation and say you study death, then often you can have a really great conversation. But you just kind of have to be a bit courageous to start. Yeah.
Speaking of which, what are your death plans? You must be well prepared.
I mean, they do change quite frequently. I have a kind of standing agreement with Shane at Lilydale Cemetery that if he is still working when I die, he will cremate me.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lovely human being. I think he'd be a good person. I don't live near the body farm, so I probably can't donate my body to a body farm science, but, take all my organs, take everything that anyone can use. As I said, I'm a materialist. I think that when I'm dead, I'm not there. And if there's anything useful, people can take that and do good with it. And cremate me. I don't mind where I am. Do something fun.
I did notice in the corner of your office there, you've got,
what is that? See the coffin?
In the corner of your office.
So, okay, this is I know, empty shelves, which is really embarrassing for a scholar, but there's a reason there's empty shelves. And that is because this is my coffin. This is the coffin that I will be probably cremated in.
Look at that. So Hannah's getting in the coffin. Oh my God. It's cardboard. So if you can't get in it because it would knock over.
Yeah, I'll crush it. So it's a cardboard coffin and I use it in teaching. So my students decorate it every year.
Oh, wow.
And they add stories and they add kind of how they feel about learning about death, and they've added memorials to people they know who've loved, who've died, and there's religious texts from all the different religions. And I started doing this a while ago when I was teaching death, and then I thought, well, it would be a shame to waste it when I go. So it's just become my coffin. This is the coffin I will be buried in. And I often think, save you money.
Great. I love it.
Fine.
It was great. Yeah. Some nice drawings on there.
Yeah, it's good. And then every year, students can add more, and it'll just be, not some small part of me. It'll be all of my students I've ever taught will be part of my death, which I think is quite nice.
Brilliant.
My coffin.
So that's great. You got your coffin all ready to go.
Yeah, always prepaid. No. Actually, some mates gave me that. So I didn't even pay for it. It's a free coffin. I was like, wow, I'll take that one.
Thanks, Hannah. So before at the end of sort of these chats, I always like to ask if anyone has anything to plug or any socials or anything to tell people about. Pluggity time.
The exciting thing that I have coming out is I have finally written a popular book about death and dying. And it is out next year, so you'll have to wait a little bit, but it's out in 2026 with Thames and Hudson, and it is called How to Die in the 21st Century. Lessons in Mortality.
What's it about?
It's about 6 lessons in how to die and how death and dying has changed in the 21st century, and therefore, like, what does that mean for when we, do a funeral or cremate someone, or what does that mean for grief and how to approach that? So it's kind of a how-to guide for death, but for life.
Yeah.
Uplifting.
Oh,
yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, once we have more information about that, I'll post it on socials and
put in the link
and all sorts of stuff, and you let us know. Fantastic. Do you have social media, or do you got a website?
I have a website, yes. So, if people would like to follow up with me and follow what I'm doing and publications and future books and, I don't know, podcasts, musical theatre one day, who knows?
Media appearances, you do a few of those every now and then.
Lots of TV. They can just go to hannahgould.com. That's me. I exited all other social media because I kept reminding myself that I was going to die, and so I thought I should stop wasting time on it.
It's probably very healthy.
Yeah. Just remember you're going to die, everyone. It's fine. You'll be fine.
It's fine. Nothing you can do about it. Accept it.
We're all going to die.
Live with it.
Yeah.
Just live with the fact that you're going to die.
Yeah. See, sounds easy. Pretty tough. We'll get there.
Brill. Hannah Gould, thank you so much for taking the time. Lovely to speak with you.
Thank you for having me. So lovely to speak to you.
All right. We'll catch you soon. And that is it for this week's episode. I want to say a massive thank you to Hannah for taking the time to share her experiences with us. And a huge thanks to you all as well for listening. For photos, links, and more about this episode, please head to noordinarymonday.com and look for the episode page. You can also find information on our socials via Linktree. Our handle is noordinarymonday. If you have questions or want to share your own career story with us, we'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch via our socials. You can also email hello, HELLO, at noordinarymonday.com, or you can use the Submit Your Story page on our website. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do 2 really quick things for us. Give us a 5-star rating and review, and tell a friend. It really helps us grow the show and attract more amazing guests and inspire new listeners. The next episode will be a brilliant 2-parter. I speak to Tony Bonner, a former trauma nurse who was one of the first at the scene at the infamous Lockerbie bombing in 1988. It's a really fascinating and actually really well told story, so you don't want to miss it. So please subscribe and be the first to get new episodes. This show is produced, hosted, and edited by me, Chris Barron. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great Monday, everyone.